Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars. SoundCartel. Discrimination comes in all forms, but a not much talked about bias is against older workers who find it more difficult to apply for jobs. Why is that when they can bring so much to the table? From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. When you think of mid-career or even midlife, what age springs to mind? Perhaps mid-30s to late 40s? Well, it might be a relief to many that mid-career these days can mean those in their 60s. We're living longer and working longer, and there are untold benefits to hiring people who are in their 50s and 60s and even 70s. That's according to Roxanne Calder, Managing Director of recruitment agency Est10. With such an acute skill shortage right now, it's time to drop the insidious ageism and embrace the wisdom and experience that older workers can offer to an organisation. Chris Ashmore asks Roxanne, why do businesses typically want to hire mid-career candidates? What's attractive about them?
They've got just enough experience, just enough knowledge, just enough maturity. So they're sort of like the golden ticket in a workforce, like when you go for candidates that are new entries, there's a lot of training that goes into it. And when you have candidates that might be on the exiting side of it, then there's sort of like, well, how much time do I have with this candidate? Whereas a mid-career candidate is almost like the best of both worlds.
Well, when we think of mid-career, it's usually those that are in their mid-30s that come to mind. Have we got it wrong with that demographic?
Yeah, I think we have now. Understandably, we used to think, and we probably, the great majority still do think that mid-career probably sits around that 35 to 40. But the reason we have that wrong now is for a number of reasons. One is the situation we find ourselves in with this talent shortage, which brings this whole mid-career piece to the surface as well. So there's a massive scream out globally for talent. The unemployment rate sitting at 3.4%, which is what we call close to full employment, meaning that those that are unemployed, you can't necessarily tap into them to fill your vacancies. So when we look at mid-career, they're the ones that we want to work with because they've got the experience, etc., and the knowledge and the maturity. But it's no longer that 35-year bracket because of the whole way that the workforce is now set up. So mid-career is actually somewhere sitting in that 50 to 55. And the reason for that is a whole variety of reasons. So first of all, you've got the ageing population. So everyone that's sort of exiting the workforce, all that group of people also typically had a life expectancy that would sit around that 70-year mark. So therefore, the retirement age was less. Now our life expectancy sits at circa 83 years of age. So we're also in the workforce for longer. Plus, for a lot of people financially, for some people, they want to be in the workforce for the intellectual stimulation, but also financially, we can't avoid that, that factor as well with the way that superannuation is geared and retirement. So for a lot of people, they want to be in the workforce for financial reasons. So no longer is that retirement piece sitting at such a younger age. Therefore, where we used to view the mid-career candidate as, say, 35, now really sits in that sort of 50-55 bracket, mostly because, for the same reasons that we viewed 35 before, we still have a workforce at that 50 to 55 years that have got years ahead of them to still contribute. So that's why they sit mid-career. Plus, for the first time in our history in Australia, we have 5 generations that are working together. And guess where that 50 to 55-year-olds sit? Right in the middle. So there's 2 of the generational pieces above them, 2 of them below. But certainly there's, bias around that, and not everyone is across that piece. Shame.
Well, that's right. I mean, companies, they tend not to want to hire those in their 50s or 60s. Is that right?
Well, I think that's a statement that might be too big a statement to make, but if you scratch the surface, I think it's accurate. And it doesn't help that our own Australian Bureau of Statistics defines an older worker, wait for it, as someone who's 40 years and above. So if you're 40, you're now defined as an older worker. So if our own statistical research is defining it in that way, it's any wonder we fall into that same trap ourselves. And look, I don't want to be one of those people that's just a massive advocate of pushing out older workers or removing bias, etc., because at the same token, there are imperfections that come with every single demographic of the workforce. And, if we were to generalise on that, probably For someone who is deemed as older, it would be on the technology piece. And I think that's probably fair to say that. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that, because equally they bring so much more to the workforce as well. So whilst that might be a gap or viewed, there's so much more that they bring to the workforce as well. But there is probably definitely bias around ageism.
Mazars is an international audit, tax and advisory firm committed to helping clients confidently build and grow their businesses. To find out how Mazars can support your business, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.
Can I ask, what is good about a 55-plus-year-old employee for business? What do they offer the workforce?
There is so much that they can contribute. For a start, wisdom, experience. For anyone who is 55 when they went through the pandemic last year, they would have weathered GFC as well. So I know that I worked through the GFC, and whilst it's very different to the pandemic, it taught me enough to be able to manage my own business in a way that was good to, in terms of cost base and all those sorts of things, and also knowing that you get through these things. There's some wisdom that comes with that sort of age bracketing as well. I think that, in that age bracket as well, there's a level of coping mechanism, resilience, maturity, mentoring, nurturing that you can give to those that are working with you. You probably view life a little bit differently, so you no longer maybe compete so much, but you might more collaborate with people. You want to teach people or show people. There's so much that can be contributed, not to mention the fact that all the years of experience in different industries. So you might work for an accounting firm now, but potentially you worked for a software firm before or a media firm before. There's so many different pieces of knowledge and experience that you can bring into the company that you are now working at.
Well, we hear about diversity, people of different backgrounds, and how that's a good thing for business. The same surely must be said of having people of different ages.
Oh, completely. Like diversity, all of that is so important and so relevant and so critical for business. And absolutely the different age groups and demographics around that sits in that as well. And as I mentioned, the 5 different generations that we have for the first time in our lifetime working in an environment, how incredible is that to think that you could have maybe a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old working alongside someone in their 70s. Imagine what the person in the 70s can share with them, about what it was like when they first entered the workforce, or just their ability to communicate with people, liaise with people. I think there's incredible benefit with that. And also vice versa. What the 18-year-old can be teaching the person in their 70s in terms of technology, how to get around things, how to do things. I think that it would be such a loss for us not to embrace that.
That was Roxanne Calder, Managing Director of EST 10. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow @BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.